In a small village on the edge of Gabon's dense forests, Martin lived a simple life as a farmer. His days were spent tilling the fields and residing in the modest home he inherited from his family. For as long as he could remember, nothing significant had ever happened in his life. But one day, his ordinary existence changed forever. The sky was clear and sunny that day. While Martin worked in his field, he suddenly felt a heavy blow to his head. Rubbing his eyes, he looked down and saw a strange stone with peculiar symbols engraved on it. Before he could understand what was happening, the stone attached itself to his head and wouldn't come off. Martin screamed, clawing at the stone, but it wouldn't budge. No matter how much he pulled, the stone clung to his scalp as though it had been fused there. News of Martin's bizarre predicament spread through the village like wildfire. The villagers, initially amused by his odd new hat, soon grew uneasy. What began as laughter and jokes turned into wary glances and hushed whispers. Some speculated that Martin had been cursed by a wandering spirit. Others believed he had angered the gods. Martin himself was consumed by fear and frustration. His every waking moment was plagued by the weight of the stone, both physical and mental. Then came the whispers. At first, the voices were faint, like the rustling of leaves in a gentle breeze. But they grew louder with each passing day. They weren't human, nor did they belong to any creature Martin had ever heard. The voices spoke in a language unfamiliar, yet oddly comprehensible. They revealed truths he hadn't sought. Truths about the villagers, their secrets, their fears, and their sins. One day, as he walked through the market, Martin found himself staring at old woman Nadine, the village healer. The whispers grew louder in his ears, revealing a scandal from years past. Nadine had betrayed her closest friend to save herself during a famine. Martin staggered back, clutching his head. It wasn't just Nadine. Everyone he saw came with a story, a hidden sin. The stone had unlocked the most terrifying of abilities, the ability to see the truths people worked hardest to bury. At first, Martin tried to ignore the stone's incessant murmurings. He stopped going to the market and isolated himself in his home. But the whispers found him there too. They came in his dreams, in the dead of night, even in the rustling of the wind through his fields. Sleep became a distant memory, replaced by restless nights filled with visions of people's darkest moments. Desperate for answers, Martin turned to the village elders, hoping they could explain his predicament. The oldest among them, a man named Tumba, examined the stone closely. "This is no ordinary curse," Tumba said solemnly. "This stone, it has a will of its own. It seeks something, though what that is, I cannot say." Martin's frustration boiled over. "Then how do I get rid of it?" he demanded. But Tumba only shook his head. "You don't," he replied gravely. One night, utterly exhausted, Martin collapsed onto his bed. As sleep overtook him, the stone's whispers became a vivid dream. He found himself standing in a vast field under a blood-red sky. Before him stood a great tree, its branches twisted and bare. Hanging from the branches were mirrors, each reflecting a face he recognized, the villagers. But the mirrors shattered one by one, their fragments falling into the ground. From each shard sprouted a thorny vine, and those vines coiled around Martin, pulling him to the earth. He woke with a gasp, sweat soaking his clothes. The dream felt too real to dismiss. The whispers seemed pleased, almost celebratory, as though guiding him towards something inevitable. Determined to find answers, Martin resolved to leave the village. With nothing but a sack of provisions and an old machete, he ventured into Gabon's dense forests. The villagers watched him go with a mix of pity and relief, glad to see the source of their unease disappear into the wilderness. The forest was alive with sounds, chirping insects, rustling leaves, distant animal calls. But to Martin, it was eerily silent. The stone's whispers had grown louder, drowning out the world around him. After days of wandering, Martin stumbled upon a hidden cave. Its entrance was overgrown with moss and vines, almost as though nature itself sought to conceal it. But the stone pulsed warmly on his head, guiding him forward. Inside, the air was cool and damp, and the walls were adorned with ancient carvings. They depicted a story, a star falling from the heavens, shattering upon impact and scattering its fragments across the earth. Each fragment chose a bearer, granting them immense power, but also burdening them with unimaginable responsibility. As Martin ventured deeper into the cave, the carvings grew more elaborate. He saw depictions of people, farmers, warriors, kings, all bearing stones on their heads. Some were revered as saviors, others cursed as bringers of destruction. The whispers urged him onward until he reached a chamber illuminated by an otherworldly light. In the center lay a pool of water, its surface shimmering like liquid silver. Martin peered into the pool, and the whispers fell silent. The water showed him his past, a young boy ostracized by the village who had died under mysterious circumstances. Martin's reflection twisted and changed, revealing himself as a boy, laughing cruelly at the young outcast. His laughter turned to horror as the boy slipped, falling into the river and vanishing beneath the current. Martin fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. The whispers returned, but this time they were mournful, almost compassionate. The stone had chosen him not out of malice, but as a form of penance. Martin realized that to rid himself of the stone, he would have to confront his guilt and take responsibility for his actions. He reached into the pool, and the water rippled violently. The cave trembled, and the whispers became deafening. As Martin stood, he felt the stone's weight lift. Slowly, it detached from his head, falling into his hands. He stared at it, overwhelmed by a sense of both relief and loss. The whispers faded, leaving a heavy silence in their wake. Martin emerged from the cave, clutching the stone tightly. But as he stepped back into the forest, it slipped from his grasp. He watched in horror as it rolled down the path and came to rest at the feet of a child, a young boy who had wandered away from his family. The boy picked up the stone, his eyes widening as it adhered to his head. Martin called out, but the boy didn't seem to hear him. The whispers had found a new bearer. Martin collapsed to the ground, his journey complete, but his heart heavy. The curse had not ended. It had only moved on. Though Martin had given his life for the village, the stone's cycle remained unbroken. As it returned to the village, it set the stage for a new chapter, one that would reshape the fate of the community forever. The end.